I looked at the internet today. Ugh, what a cesspool of condescension it can be. With Halloween coming up, there seems to be a lot of discussion about culturally insensitive costumes, often headlined with a series of memes featuring an upset-looking person holding up a picture of a Halloween costume caricature of their race or culture, with a caption saying, "This is not okay." Sure, I get that. When I was a kid, I used to get really mad when Americans pretended to mimic English accents for fun. I'd think, no, that's not how it is. That's not how my mother talks. That's not how my granddad sounds. You are not them. You don't get to do that. You guys are a bunch of ignorant jerks. But if I ever said anything, my complaints were casually dismissed, because in the America I remember, when it came to cultural sensitivity, you don't get to be mad when your culture is maligned if you're white. But as a grown-up, I honestly don't care. At all. It's actually kind of shocking to me to remember how bent out of shape I got about that. I mean, I was willing to physically fight people over it. I wanted to punch them right in their smug little mouths when they claimed it was innocent fun. And you know what? That's not okay. Violence is never an appropriate answer to hurt feelings. So, I skimmed over an article about cultural appropriation where a Japanese woman said this in response to some Americans crying, "Cultural appropriation!" over a white girl wearing a kimono. She said, "The only people who think culture shouldn't be shared are racists." The word racist and racism have been thrown around the internet so much lately that they no longer mean what they're supposed to mean. I can appreciate the sentiment behind the Japanese woman's quote, but that's not racism. Racism is a belief in inferiority or superiority of one race over or under another. What that was tribalism, which is the behavior and attitudes that stem from strong loyalty to one's own tribe or social group. So I'm going to use the words tribalist and tribalism a few times here, because that is an important distinction. I've seen a lot of tribalist outlooks, a lot of tribalism on the internet lately, on social media, be it racial, cultural, dogmatic, gender-based, socio-political, religious, etc. And it all sucks, because it always pits us against them, when the clouded reality is they are us, and we are them. I'm a big Star Trek fan. One thing a lot of people like about Star Trek is Gene Roddenberry's vision of a future utopian ideology, where everyone on Earth treats each other equitably, because they've seen the bigger picture of other intelligent life on numerous worlds spanning the galaxy. But if you watch a lot of Star Trek, you'll notice that moralistic episodes about the evils of racism and tribalism are a common recurring theme. But they replace the various alienating tribes of present-day Earth with actual aliens, extraterrestrials, in order to teach us that if humans can learn to get along with weird-looking blue people with antennae on their heads that hate us for no reason, then surely we can learn to get along with each other. I'm sorry, Mr. Roddenberry. 50 years later, we are still struggling to learn that lesson. Hold on, guys. Hold that thought. Someone is wrong on the internet. Set phasers to kill. Okay, I'm back. Among all the tribalism has come several frequently repeated rallying cries about which tribes have suffered more as a collective group, which tribes deserve our emotional capital, and which tribes matter right now. By definition, a tribe will always matter to its constituent tribalists, and not matter as much or at all to other tribes. Please understand, when I say tribes, I'm not talking about races, nations, or cultures. It is literally anything that draws a line between us and them. Any group, any faction, any socio-political movement, political party, ism, ist, etc., that bonds us to a collective. That is a tribe. One of the smartest things I've heard in recent memory was this: liberty does not come from belonging to a group. That's worth repeating. Liberty does not come from belonging to a group. I used to associate myself with all kinds of ideological groups. Now, I do not. I am not an ist ascribing to an ism. I am an individual. I am a being free from the collective, and it is fantastic. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, as an individual, to whom do I matter? And perhaps more importantly, what matters to me? And ultimately, why? I believe I personally matter to my family, to my God, in some respects to my community, to various individuals within my sphere of influence, and certainly to those who profit from my existence, my spending habits, my talents, my time, or my company. And I probably matter to some extent to various tribes that want to lay claim to my demographic in order to further their own agenda. And I think most of that is applicable to most people. But what matters to me is a much more complex question. Ask yourself that question right now, and see how much of that answer is uniquely you, and how much of it is tribalism speaking. Once upon a time, what mattered to me was feeling vindicated when I perceived personal injustice, when people joked about the culture my mother grew up in. And now it does not. At all. I used to teach a class on American culture at Shanghai Normal University. One day, I taught a lesson about some of the big socio-political issues at the time. When the subject of racism came up, one of these Chinese students earnestly said, "But, Mr. Dewey, in China, there is no racism, since we are all Chinese." My dear Chinese friends, there is no lack of tribalism in the world's most populated country. There is merely a much larger tribe. It makes me wonder, if one day we travel to other planets like Gene Roddenberry envisioned, and meet other humanoid life with funny-looking ridges on their foreheads or green skin, will the tribalism on Earth come to a stop because we will have seen the bigger picture? Or will we simply consolidate into a much larger tribe to collectively poke fun at those uptight Vulcans for being way too logical all the time? Some of you might remember, a few years back there was a guy named Joe McCaffery. He ran a jiu-jitsu school, and he had a jiu-jitsu purple belt, which he earned legitimately. But he made the news in jiu-jitsu circles for the following reason. He made a video where he promoted himself in front of his students from purple belt to brown belt. Now, for those not familiar with the concept of belt promotions in martial arts, this isn't how it's supposed to work. Instead, someone with a black belt promotes people to higher ranks. Pretty simple, right? So, understandably, a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu community were upset about this. Many of them took to the internet to rant and rave over the issue. Now, I've seen fraudulent self-promoting black belts being exposed as fakes quite a few times before, but this was different. Here we have a guy who had a respectable, legitimate rank, under a legitimate instructor in a legitimate lineage, who basically publicly denounced all that so-called legitimacy as pretentious garbage. And he published a live video of his self-promotion in front of all of his students for the world to see. Every other self-promoted BJJ person that I've ever heard of did it in secret, and they lied about who gave them their belt in order to keep up the appearance of legitimacy. But not this Joe McCaffery. Instead, he openly and unapologetically tells the world he gave himself the rank and why he did it. A lot of people are upset because in jiu-jitsu, a rank advancement represents the sacred passing of skill and knowledge between a teacher and a student. I remember getting upset a bunch of times before at people who pretended to have higher ranks, because jiu-jitsu is hard, and earning those ranks is really hard. So when something is given without being earned, it tends to hurt the sensibilities of those who are actually doing all the hard work. And yet, I cannot bring myself to be angry at Joe McCaffery for appropriating a belt rank that he openly gave himself. I just can't seem to get mad at the guy, like the internet seems to want me to do. In his video he says, "The one thing about jiu-jitsu is it's about truth. You cannot put on a black belt, a blue belt, a brown belt, or anything else, and step on the mat and not expect to see yourself revealed. So it's most likely only a matter of time before one of the angry people of the internet stops by his gym and challenges Joe to see what they can reveal about Joe McCaffery." Over the last week, I've seen a lot of posts on social media related to the concept of cultural appropriation, of which Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is an interesting case study. Jiu-Jitsu, a martial art exclusive to the ancient samurai class, appropriated by a 19th century educator, and modified into judo for the common man. Later, appropriated by a family of Brazilians and modified into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which has somehow led me, an American living in China, occasionally wearing a modified 19th century Japanese kimono, teaching a Brazilian art to people from every continent on Earth, in the People's Republic of China. Where's that picture of Genki Sudo holding up his sign that says, "We are all one," when you really need it? Most of the talk regarding cultural appropriation this past week has centered around cultural insensitive Halloween costumes. Specifically, white people dressing up as Native Americans, or white people in blackface, or, well, you name it. In past decades, this was fairly common, largely due to the popularity of cowboy westerns. Kids wanted to dress up as the characters that they saw on television. As a 7-year-old, I dressed up as a Shoshone warrior for Halloween, because I thought the native tribes of Idaho, where I grew up, were flippin' awesome, and I was pretty obsessed with learning everything I could about them. But, as an adult, I wouldn't wear that costume for Halloween. Why not? Honestly, right now, I'm not sure. I could say it would be out of respect to the native friends that I have. But, mostly, I think it would be out of fear of being lynched by the people of the internet. Again, children want to dress up as the characters that they see on TV and in the movies. But it's been a long time since American kids watched shows like Rawhide, Gunsmoke, or Bonanza. For you younger kids, those were Western TV shows about cowboys. It's been decades since children looked up to the likes of John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. Now, instead of playing cowboys and Indians, children that actually still play outside reenact scenes from Ninjago, superhero movies, Transformers, or whatever they watch on TV. But it's still the exact same game. Two teams on opposing sides. Basically, it's football. And for Halloween, kids want to dress up as Elsa from Frozen, Pikachu from Pokemon, or Kylo Ren from Star Wars. But the people of the internet have spoken. Apparently, white folks are still dressing up in droves as natives at Halloween parties, and this is upsetting a lot of people. Well, I for one had not seen a white American do this since the 1980s. One white Canadian couple years ago, yes, but not an actual US citizen. It's probably happened, but I haven't seen it. So I scoured the internet to see exactly how common a behavior this currently is outside of my social sphere. What I did was find 3 cases of celebrities being harshly rebuked, followed by them issuing public apologies for wearing feathered headdresses and war paint to costume parties. The lifestyles of the rich and famous are different than mine? Who knew? Australian actor Chris Hemsworth issued an apology a while back for attending a Lone Ranger-themed party, dressed in the traditional dress of First Nations or Native American people. He said it was an act of ignorance on his part. He should have known better. He feels sorry and begs forgiveness from all those he offended for culturally appropriating their ancestors' identity. And that's fine, if he feels that way. I mean, I guess. A lot of people, myself included, don't care what anyone wears to a costume party. But some people care about that sort of thing a lot. So, good for him for wanting to make things right. But let's talk about his more famous costume. Thor. Yes, Thor. I am not only a descendant of Norse Vikings. I can literally trace my genealogy back to Asgard. I am not joking. That is what the historical documents say. My ancient pedigree chart includes none other than Woden, aka Odin, and his son Thor. These may have been the historical individuals who inspired the Norse legends, or it may be because it was a common practice amongst my ancestors to claim lineage from the gods. Either way, Thor is part of my family tree, part of my ancestral heritage, part of me. So where's my apology, Chris Hemsworth? You wear that Thor costume a lot. You wear it in the movies. You wear it in your promotional work, YouTube, public appearances, Saturday Night Live, in comedy sketches. Wait a minute. Comedy sketches? Are my ancestors a joke to you, Chris Hemsworth? I know your movies are high production value affairs, and you portray my super great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddad in a mostly positive way. But Johnny Depp did the same thing with Tonto in the Lone Ranger movie, and he still got a lot of flack from the public for portraying someone he was not related to. Oh, but Ramsey, that's different, because natives were an oppressed people and Vikings were not. Really? So that whole thing when the Romans conquered, Norse-occupied Britain, killed, tortured, and enslaved my ancestors, followed by centuries of oppressive rule, changing hands from one despot to the next, which kept my people poor and uneducated generation after generation, doesn't count. Come on, Ramsey, that was in the past. All the people responsible for those actions died a long time ago, and all your oppressed, enslaved Norse ancestors are dead now. Besides, you grew up in modern America, so you don't get to complain. No kidding. Where else have I heard that exact same thing before? Oh no, Ramsey, that's not the same thing. See, you're white, so no one knows or cares what your ancestors went through. You might as well come from a long line of people who oppressed your own ancestors, and everybody else because they were probably mostly white too. Well, gee, I never thought about it that way. No one gives a damn about me, my feelings, or my ancestors because of the color of my skin. That totally sounds just and fair. Got it! Thanks for the education in apologetics, guys. But, Ramsey, privilege and stuff. Okay, fine. Seriously, though, this is all tongue-in-cheek. Except the part about being a descendant of Thor, son of Odin, of Asgard. That part is 100% serious. I don't care. I don't care at all what Mr. Hemsworth wears, what character he portrays, or who lays claim to ancestral rights to be offended at costume wearing. And here's why. Chris Hemsworth has no power whatsoever to damage, diminish, or take away from the sacred bond I have with my ancestors. Even if his portrayal of Thor was 100% malicious and deliberately offensive, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change who my ancestors were, how they lived, what they did. It doesn't change anything about me. Although it does make it very difficult to do a Google search image for any pictures of Thor that don't prominently feature Mr. Hemsworth in costume. And if that sort of thing does legitimately offend you, because you consider it a violation of something sacred to you, that's fine. I get that. Everybody has something they hold as sacred. But can we reasonably expect other people to venerate what we personally feel is sacred? No. No, we cannot. At least not in a country that allows freedom of religion and separation of church and state, like the United States. Not so much in China. Wait, what? What does this have to do with religion? Well, everything, actually. Mandating public apologies from people who sin against the cult of social justice is no different than Giles Corey in 1692 being threatened with death by crushing weight if he did not admit to his guilt during the Salem witch trials. And just like Giles Corey, I say, more weight. If you don't know that story, Giles Corey, when pressed by the mob to crush him to death with weight on his chest, each time demanded more weight, because he would not give in to that mob mentality. Make no mistake, this weird thing that is happening now is a religion. A religion is a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. And if it's your particular religion, more power to you, because I believe all people should have the right to worship as they see fit. But it's quickly threatening to become the state religion. And that's not okay. I live in a country with a state religion, and it is called communism. Many of you, most of you listening on YouTube do not. Count yourself fortunate. I am not advocating that we be insensitive to the feelings of others. To the contrary. I'm not suggesting that we should make a mockery of what others hold sacred. To the contrary. What I am saying is that we are one step away from legislating subjective morality, and that is objectively wrong. My Viking ancestors would have laughed me to scorn if I were seriously offended at Mr. Hemsworth Thor costume. After all, they were among the mightiest of warriors, and the most innovative of explorers, not diplomats of delicate feelings. What would your ancestors think about the concept of cultural appropriation in modern America? Be honest. I wonder what the ancient samurai would think about Mr. Joe McCaffery's jiu-jitsu self-promotion. I don't think they would understand what they were supposed to be looking at, to be honest. Samurai didn't wear ranked belts. And I don't think they quibbled about legitimate lineages of martial arts instruction. They fought swift battles to the death, and chose death at their own hands before dishonor. No wonder Miyamoto Musashi wrote that the way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death. By that definition, you don't see a lot of actual warriors in today's dojos, or today's internets, for that matter. Thank you for listening. Now get out there and train.